this beautiful, chilly Friday morning. I hope you all enjoy the weather for the next 48 hours. High 50s, low 60s, I think, or I don't know if it goes backwards, but most importantly, it's a beautiful day in Bronzeville and of course the region, so go out there with your families and have some fun. I know we all want to stay in, but we never get this weather. So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Bronzeville Chamber of Commerce and the City of Bronzeville, we welcome you in joining us for a panel discussion to learn about the updates regarding the Rio Grande Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as RGV MPO. And I'll continuously use RGV MPO because it's too long to pronounce, right? And we all know what it is. So my name is Esme Villarreal. I am the President and CEO for your local chamber, the Bronzeville Chamber of Commerce. And this morning, once again, it's my pleasant duty to welcome everyone. And we thank you for your support. I know everyone has many things to do this Friday, but your participation is very important to us. I do encourage you to keep your phones in silent mode so we can honor, of course, our panelists as they're speaking. Again, today's conversation is to learn about the RGV MPO, a federally funded program that works with Rio Grande Valley communities and the Texas Department of Transportation to plan for the region's future transportation needs. The MPO also serves as a collaborative structure of committees and organizations that creates partnerships to address the region's needs. The RGV MPO is responsible for the regional planning process for all modes of transportation. And I learned this week. Ron, you should be very proud of me.
Yeah, that's good.
I did a lot of research, but it's always fun to learn more every single day. And I also learned that they do provide technical assistance to the local governments of the Rio Grande Valley in planning, coordinating, and implementing transportation decisions for the area. The RGV MPO administers all federal funds for urban transportation improvements in the RGV, including road and highway expansion, maintaining the existing infrastructure through pavement management systems, safety transportation planning, emergency response planning, route studies, and transit planning. Today's conversation is moderated by Ramiro Gonzalez, Director of Government and Community Affairs for the City of Bronzeville, and also our Bronzeville Chamber of Commerce Board Director and Governmental Affairs Committee Chair. Our distinguished panelists are Mr. Ron Gatza, Interim Director, RGV MPO, Mr. Noel Bernat, City Manager, City of Bronzeville, and Pete Alvarez, FART District Engineer from the Texas Department of Transportation. I encourage you today to take the opportunity to respectfully engage with our panelists, as we do have a Q&A session planned at the end of the program. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, with us today this morning, Mr. Ramiro Gonzalez, moderator for today's discussion. And that deserves a clap.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to first start by introducing our panelists, and I'll start going from left to right here. Mr. Ron Garza was appointed Executive Director of the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council in August of 2016, and also has the pleasure of being named Interim Executive Director of the RGV MPO as of, a couple months ago? He has over 22 years of managing programs and operations in city and state government. Prior to LRGVDC, Mr. Garza served in various leadership capacities as a state employee with Texas Health and Human Services and the City of San Antonio. He holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Southwest Texas State, or Texas State now, and a master's in education and counseling from the University of Texas at Austin. He's a devout public servant who's passionate about utilizing collaborative partnerships, innovation, and teamwork to improve the prosperity and quality of life. Welcome, Ron. And so, my boss, Noel Bernal, City Manager, City of Brownsville. Noel Bernal began his service as City Manager for the City of Brownsville. Man, it's already been 10 months. Wow. December 3rd, 2018. He reports to the Mayor and City Commission and provides leadership and management to over 1,400 employees and $147 million operating budget. Mr. Bernal has served communities through South, Central, and North Texas throughout his professional career in public service, beginning in small cities and progressing into leadership roles with high-growth markets in Austin, Round Rock, Dallas, Fort Worth. His prior experience includes serving as City Administrator of La Villa, Valfurias, Assistant City Manager in Taylor, and Deputy City Manager in Capel. He earned his undergraduate degree an MPA from the University of Texas Pan American. He's a credentialed manager through the ICMA and a certified public manager through Texas State, and a graduate of the Senior Executive Institute at the University of Virginia. His professional involvement includes being a member of ICMA, TCMA, Texas City Management Association, where he has served on numerous committees, including founding member of the City Managers of Tomorrow Committee and a Region 7 treasurer. He served on the Executive Board of Opportunities for Williamson and Burnett County and a nonprofit community action agency, and is a 2011 Texas City Management Association Clarence E. Ridley Scholar. Welcome, Noah. Thank you for joining us. And last but definitely not least, Pete Alvarez is a district textile engineer, FAR district. The district comprises of 8 counties: Jim Hogg, Brooks, Kennedy, Willacy, Cameron, Hidalgo, Star, and Zapata. So all the way to Laredo, right?
Pretty much.
A textile veteran, Alvarez began his career with the department as a conditional grant recipient and worked as a summer employee in '93 and '94. Alvarez joined the department full-time in 1995 as an engineering assistant at the FAR district. In 1997, rotated to the FAR area office. During his decade of service at the FAR area office, he served as design, construction, and assistant area engineer. From 2007 to 2013, Alvarez served as director of maintenance, where he was responsible for overseeing the district's maintenance program. Alvarez became the deputy district engineer for the FAR district in 2013, served as Laredo district engineer from 2015 to 2017, and he is a Longhorn, a proud Longhorn. He graduated from the University of Texas in 1994 and a PE in 1999. Welcome, Pete. So I want to kind of just dive down, just really start kind of, at the macro level, having a discussion on why the merger, and why the merger from a state level, from a textile perspective, why the merger from a regional level, Ron, and why the merger is at the local level. So Pete, I'd like to start with you is, this merger took a long time. I know that, I was kind of in the process, but it was 25, 30 years in the making. So why? And just kind of take us through, textile perspective.
Thank you, Ramiro. Appreciate the opportunity. Yes, about 25 years in the making. 1993 is the first conversations that if I recall correctly. Why is it important? Well, the valley, we continue to grow. We have doubled in population from 1985 to 2000 and from 2000 to today. And we're expected to double from 1.5 million to 3 million by 2040. That's a short 20 years away. And so some of the challenges that we face is what transportation infrastructure are we going to need to be able to effectively move people and goods? And so the discussions when it came to the RGV MPO were, okay, how do we put ourselves in a position to compete as a region with the other heavily populated areas in the state, the metro areas, if you will, the Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and Austin, if you will. So these discussions took place, and I'm very proud to say that over the last 2.5 years or so, since I've been back from Laredo, we have grown our district portfolio, being all the projects in the southernmost 8 counties. We have grown from 4.9 billion to 7 billion today. And I just had a discussion with staff yesterday that will likely be at 10 billion in the next 2 to 3 years. So that's doubling the design advanced planning portfolio. When it comes to construction, just 2 years ago, we were at 500 million under contract in our district. And today we're at 1 billion. So we have doubled our construction workload. Well, all these things are done in an effort to facilitate the movement of people and goods. Obviously, safety is our #1 priority. And so we look at any and all opportunities to take care of that. The importance of the RGV MPO merger from the state level, as you will know, this is a federal program, and so monies are allocated by USDOT through FHWA, Federal Highway Administration. And so we talk a lot of acronyms, so I'll try my best to explain what those acronyms are. So the Federal Highway Administration oversees the program. Funds are federal funds that go to the local community. And so the way we administer that is federal funds basically get deposited into the state account, and then we, in turn, through the MPOs, deliver those funds to the local governments. And so we've been working very closely with them over the last 6 to 7 months, where you have FHWA, TxDOT, and the newly formed RGV MPO. We're working through a transition, and that transition enables us to be able to basically stand down the 3 MPOs that we had before, the Brownsville, Harness San Benito, and Hidalgo County. Those stood down on September the 30th, and October the 1st was the official stand-up date for the new RGV MPO. It is important because now we were one voice, one region, one mission, and that's to deliver projects. As a state, as a district engineer for TxDOT and as an agency, our primary role is safety number 1 for the traveling public, but most importantly, after that is to deliver projects. How do we deliver projects? Well, there's phases that we have to go through. We talk about the advanced planning stages, the environmentals, the schematics, the right-of-ways. Those usually take, depending on the project and the magnitude of the project, they take a long time. If you ask folks, why does it take so long? Well, we have to follow all the federal procedures, okay? And so those things are really what set the program and kickstart the program, if you will. Once projects has gone through all the advanced planning stages, then we actually do the plan specs and the estimates, basically the construction set of plans. At that point, a project is considered shovel ready. It's ready to go to construction. And then the challenge comes. Well, how are we going to get the funding to build this project? Because you start looking at advanced planning, that whole cost, when you look at the big picture, is anywhere between 5 to 10% of the total project cost. 90% is construction. And so that's where FHWA, TxDOT, and the local entities come together to deliver those type of projects.
So just as a follow-up to that, I know when the conversations were ongoing about the merger, there was this topic of having a seat at the table. So now that we are the RGV MPO, do we have that proverbial 5th seat at the table?
As far as City of Brownsville, yeah.
No, not city. I'm talking at the TxDOT, at the
Big Five.
state level.
Yes, the Big Five. Yes, there's no doubt about it. We are now the 5th largest MPO. The Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and now the RGV. And so we're the 5th largest MPO, and that makes a big difference. We are now represented, if you will. We have big meetings, planning partners meetings as an example. Indirectly, we, the FAR district, wedged ourselves in there. Even though we're not an metro area, we felt that it was important to have representation. And so we requested permission to attend these meetings, and I was blessed to be given that opportunity, representing each and every one of you. And now that we have merged, even more justification to be part of that process. So yes, we are at the table.
Perfect, awesome. So Ron, I think, talk us through your observations on the regional importance of the MPO. But I also want to ask you a specific question because you are the first interim director. And so also, talk to us a little bit about the challenges you've seen over the last,
I think that's another
5 to 6 months. But just very briefly, so regional and then just kind of some challenges and some, how you overcome those.
Absolutely. Thank you and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it helps to give a little bit of context first. So I'm the executive director of the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council. That is informally known as what's called the Council of Governments. We cover 3 county areas. We have a board of directors of 27 members that are elected officials. So essentially my bosses are the mayors and county judges of the 3 county area. So obviously through a lot of programmatic input, I have direct relationships with all of them. We administered previously the Hidalgo County MPO, and now LRGVDC has been also tasked to provide fiscal and administrative services for the RGV MPO. Kind of backing up into how we got here, so because of the relationships, because of the fact that we touch all of them in certain ways, we facilitated a lot of the processes leading up to that point. And I think we can't move on without saying that this is a tremendous complex consolidation of organizations, tremendously complex. So we really do need to give the elected officials, and not just the key elected officials who actually had to sign the formal document to make this happen. There was 8 of them, but there was just so many elected officials, administrators, so many different people that in the course of the 6 months probably leading up to about April, it was a perfect storm of just collaboration, truly. And we can't move forward without remembering that, because we're gonna get into the day-to-day and then forget the fact that we had a lot of elected officials collaborate, concede. It was just a tremendous thing to observe, and I think that's the greatest story that we'll take away from this, because, and I think that I'm particularly sensitive to that topic because we're not known for our collaboration. So, and the fact is, like the other big 5 metros, or the other big 4 metros in the state, they have an anchoring city that dominates that region. You know, Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. We're the only region of that size that doesn't have that dominating city. City of Brownsville is the largest city in the Rio Grande Valley, but it's not 2 times or 3 times bigger than the next largest city. So, you know, I've worked for the city of San Antonio, and I saw many times that the gorilla in the room gets their way. In the Rio Grande Valley, we have to collaborate to make things like this happen. So, you know, I definitely want to say that. So, you know, April, you know, looking back at a timeline, April of 2019 was the signature ceremony, where we formally said the 8 federally designated signatories said, we're going to do this, which was monumental for our region. In May, the 9th signature to that document was the governor, which in May we went to Austin, and he put his signature creating the official, and like Pete referenced, we basically then at that point had 4 MPOs in parallel. So the region had 4 MPOs going on at the time, and June of 2019 was the RGV MPO's first official board meeting. Bylaws were discussed. That was the first action item. Second action item was appointing the chair and vice chair. The initial chairman is Mayor Dr. Ambrosio Hernandez, Mayor of FAR, and the vice chair is Judge Eddie Trevino. And very deliberately in bylaw, they will always alternate what county has the chair and vice chair. So I think that's a great arrangement. The third thing that was decided, which was a surprise to me, was I was appointed the interim executive director for the MPO. It's probably one of the largest other duties as assigned as anybody's going to get, but I was you know, very proud to do it. And again, I probably would serve in this capacity as a facilitator, as my role as LRGVDC director anyway. So, but there was a dynamic shift, obviously, when that happened. So a big thing that we had to do with the transition, you're taking 3 MPOs, you have staff of all 3 MPOs, and the great thing that every elected official was dedicated to the fact that nobody was going to lose their job because of this merge. So there was a lot of things that we had to work on from a humanistic standpoint, and as it ended up, the dust kind of settled there, and you know, so that was definitely a big challenge. You know, so I think just maybe some uncertainty going into it. I know we're on the cusp in the next month or 2, most likely appointing the future, the permanent executive director, which is an exciting thing. And again, you know, with all these large decisions, 100% of the individuals might not agree. But what's been very proud to see this group of leaders, and there's 13 members, 13 individuals that are actually the board, or the Transportation Policy Board directors. They're doing it with tact, with professionalism. They're having critical discussions behind the scenes and not in front of, you know, they're not grandstanding, anything like that. So we have put our best foot forward with this whole process, and I think that's going to garner, I think what's exciting from a regional standpoint is that these kind of things from a state level build momentum. Obviously, one story that I'll end my first remarks with, we had a high-level state official, and I've actually had this done on a federal level as well, but we had a high-level state official, and I'm not going to name names, this was about 1.5 years ago, that I was talking to, and nothing to do with transportation world, but basically told me, you really need to get those mayors together to solve this MPO, issue. And he didn't say it in that way, I'm being polite. But it was this kind of linchpin that was hanging over us. And it was an excuse that was rattling confidence of other federal and state leaders and other federal and state funding programs. So that was scary. And I know we were getting to a critical point that it was probably hurting us in a lot of other resources for the Rio Grande Valley. Because from externally, they were seeing that if you guys can't figure this out, you're not going to get this pot of money because you probably won't be able to figure that out. So we proved them wrong, and we figured it out. And I have already seen, and I'm sure these gentlemen can also agree, there's been a confidence level change from the state and the feds. So I think, of course, we will get more resources in the transportation world, but I think it's going to lead to resources in other arenas as well. Because again, confidence is key when it comes to funding capacity.
That's excellent. So thank you, Ron. So Noel, day -2, I think you hit. I think you got this issue, and so I think just kind of take us through your insights. I really think it really was the day -2 where we started getting calls on this. And,
Right.
so just take us what it means for Brownsville, what you saw, what the importance was,
Sure.
and just kind of.
Sure. Good morning, and thanks for the invite. So yes, I came in and met with the mayor and the commission members. I agreed in my contract to come in a week before. So the Monday after Thanksgiving, I was actually meeting with them, having one-on-ones, met with department heads, walked into their Monday meetings, and then I officially began December 3rd. Had a commission meeting December 4th, and at that meeting there was an item that was a little bit dicey relative to the MPO, and it's welcome to Brownsville, right? And I can appreciate though that things kind of came to a head because within the Brownsville stakeholder group, the commission, the mayor, there was communication that I felt needed to happen at a greater level, and that was pretty much the climax of that not really happening in the way that perhaps it could have been happening, so that a decision point could be reached by the Brownsville governing board. They're the ones that ultimately decide whether or not the Brownsville MPO was going to merge. And so I come in, and my role in adding value, not having been here in that 2.5-year period, is where do you start? And the biggest thing I felt was, okay, what are those critical questions that are looming over our governing body that need to be answered, right? What are those concerns? Some things, such as trust, for example, are those things. You're not going to come in here and solve trust issues day one, but you can solve technical issues, data issues, and the role that we took, the path that we took. I asked the commission, can we develop this process for how we can all kind of come together and develop this level playing field? And what we did is we brought in the Dallas-Fort Worth MPO. Part of the reason is they're the largest MPO. They are a well-oiled machine. It's not just because I came from the area. It's more so, even TxDOT, for example, would reference them in terms of, hey guys, if they could figure it out, I'm sure you all can figure it out, because they have 117 plus cities and they make it work. So I thought Mr. Michael Morris was very helpful for us. He came in and spoke to our community. He came in and spoke to our commission and during a closed session meeting as well, and had a very candid conversation with them about the value add, about the unknowns, and some of that uncertainty that was, I think, feeding into the process on a more negative side. That was relieved to some degree. It didn't go away, but it was relieved. From that point, I think it kind of cleared the air. We were able to refocus on reaching out to our local stakeholders, our San Benito, the county, Hidalgo County. I began to work closely with the mayor and joining all meetings that he was at, making sure that I was providing him support, and also being that conduit between him and the commission. So ultimately though, I think for Brownsville, where I did step outside of that box, and I'm not a policy maker, so I had to provide them with the administrative perspective, and I said, well, Brownsville has a very interesting intermodal mix, right? We have assets that contribute to the regional economy, like the port. We're the #1 transit provider in the valley. We have 3 international bridges, so we have projects that some of you all in the room know that have been on the horizon for years. You know, the East Loop, for example, and we got to the point of diminishing returns, right? MPOs generally get to the point where if you don't access that golden pot of money, you're just going to have a difficult time finding those larger scale projects, and it becomes a threat to your growth. So we also talked about that, and for us, that process proved to be valuable. Some of the principles of fairness, equity, voting rights that Ron was talking about, those meetings were sometimes uncomfortable. I was actually on the sidelines during those meetings, but I felt that those discussions were the more critical ones, because there was no denying that the value add of becoming one MPO and the potential for greater funding had been established. At some point, it took the collaboration, it took the reaching across the aisles by the elected officials so that this merger could occur. And I just don't want to add and replicate what's been said, but I think for Brownsville, we are a growing city. We are going to continue to grow. We have, cities do thoroughfare planning. Cities, we have our own traffic department. We've kind of fallen behind on our traffic synchronization, so we have capacity within our current built environment that's not being maximized because our traffic system isn't up to par. That's also a funding issue. Some of that can be supported through the MPO efforts, because as the MPO is established, it is responsive to regional needs. So we had 3 different MPOs, so there's 3 different sub-regions that are still honored within the MPO, but now the policy board gets to decide what are the topics of interest for our region. So for example, if Brownsville is not the only city that is falling behind on its traffic light improvements, that could be an area that the policy board says, let's establish a working group, or let's work through the technical advisory committee on traffic light improvements, because that might be where we have to fundamentally start as we start to tackle regional issues, perhaps the McAllen area, the Harlingen area. I've read some of their documents, and they also have gaps in local traffic improvements. So, I mean, there you go. That's not an added capacity widening of a project, but it's a project that has become a regional issue and a regional challenge from a funding perspective, and the MPO can take it up. That would be a great win for Brownsville, so that we've put in $1.5 million recently to do the high traffic intersections, but that's just phase 1 of about 5 phases that we need to get the entire city up to par with traffic synchronization. TxDOT's even making improvements in some of their intersections, but if we can't connect to those and if they don't talk to each other, you don't really get the full value. So that's just one example of issues that were local that now can become regional, and it gives us a greater opportunity at seeing funding come in to help address those problems.
Thank you, Noah. So real quick, Ron, how did the policy board, what's the makeup of the policy board now? How did Cameron County end up in that voting structure?
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's 13, so it's a weighted vote system, and again, this was part of the transition, and I will say too that, it's funny that part of the reason that some of this took so long was really nothing but a technical issue. I think some lessons learned from, if we ever merge anything again, we can't be handwriting notes on, we had different versions of notes floating around, and it just got insane to kind of keep track of, and people would get frustrated. And so, I remember going through the bylaws that we spent about, 6-7 hours maybe, literally with the key elected officials reading line by line and making edits. And I mean, it was painful from a technical standpoint. But that was a key part of this. So 13 members make up the Transportation Policy Board. That is the kind of the ultimate governing body for the actions taken by all the MPO functions. I'll throw some numbers out here, but I'll be slow so we can catch context. But Hidalgo County has and they're weighted votes. So 13 individuals get a weight of 31 different votes. And all of this was based on population. So Hidalgo County, having the largest unincorporated population, has 1 member, so 1 person representing 7 votes. The next one largest in size is the city of Brownsville. City of Brownsville is the largest municipality in the Rio Grande Valley, has 4 weighted votes. Cameron County,
One person, 4 votes.
1 person, 4 votes. The next one down would be the Cameron County, 1 person, 4 votes. City of McAllen, 1 person, 3 votes. And the thresholds of population are every 50,000 population increment. So, City of McAllen is under 150,000, they're at 129, so that's where they get the 3 votes. City of Brownsville is over 150,000, so that's why they get the 4 votes. City of Edinburgh, then we're getting into the cities that have under 100,000, has 2 votes. City of Mission has 2 votes. City of FAR, 2 votes. City of Harlingen, 2 votes. And again, those are 50,000 thresholds. City of San Benito is very interesting because they're under 50,000, but there's another federal law that has to make up a certain population of the MPO. So because it was the Harlingen-San Benito MPO, San Benito got 1 vote. And they determined that 4 other regional entities would get 1 additional vote, and that would be the Cameron County RMA. There was a question, I don't know, let me finish it, and Hidalgo County RMA, Valley Metro, and the TxDOT FAR District. But you can see there's a significant difference there between 1 vote and obviously 7 votes. So the larger entities have the larger votes.
Cool. Great.
Yeah, I just had a question on that. The new census will come out next year. Is that gonna change?
Yes,
That will weight the vote a little.
and that's going to be very interesting because we're already projecting that the city of Westlaco most likely will go into the 50,000 range, actually adding a transportation policy board member. You look at cities like Edinburgh that may hit the 100,000, that would add a vote. City of McAllen may go 1 over 50, so that might be parallel to Brownsville, unless Brownsville hits 200,000. So yes, every census, these were locked into what the 2010 census was, so the new census numbers. So obviously, it's a plug for the census. Accurate counts gets you more influence.
Cool. So, I mean, I do want to leave room for questions in a little while, in a little bit. You know, as a planner, I think we always think about public transit and the role of public transit in cities. So I know in this session there was a regional transit authority bill passed at the state level, and I know there's been a lot of discussion by Representative Martinez and Senator Lucio on light rail or some other type of mass public transit, setting the valley up for the future.
Sure.
And so I think if we could just have a conversation on, you know, how you all feel public transit plays a role. We know Brownsville is the largest public transit, but I really, I mean, you know, a lot of cities try to retrofit to, like Austin, try to retrofit to bring in light rail. So would we be ahead of the curve if we start planning for that now? So that's just the question.
Everything was easy up until the last minute. Yeah. So, you know, in terms of regional transit providers, again, it boils down to having connection between the service providers. And we have 4 service providers that provide bus transit services. And again, the term that we use all the time is seamless connectivity. People don't care what color the bus is or actually who administers it. They have to go from one point to another. So we as providers of that transit have to do always a continual improvement job on making that happen. And we've made great strides over the last couple of years. Great strides, I think. You know, and the RTA, Regional Transit Authority, which is driven by most larger, you know, metropolitan areas of the state, we didn't have one up until the governor signed that in May, which is honestly just as exciting as the merger of the MPO. It's just, it kind of has lived kind of in the background. Me personally, I think we need to get some of this MPO still kind of settled, but really close, and then we're going to really be picking up momentum for the RTA activities. But what that essentially does is, yes, it sets up a framework for a light rail. And the argument there would be right-of-way acquisition would be great if we can do it proactively. There's cities in Austin, Houston, you know, even Dart and Dallas that are struggling, you know, because light rail is an expensive proposition. But I think even though that's maybe the vision, that is the end of the continuum.
Sure, of course.
Because I think as transit operators down here, we understand there's still a lot of gaps and used gaps, you know, and really light rail is a continuum from a pedestrian to a bicycle, to a car, to a bus, to a light rail. And we can't get there until we have the robust system of transit transportation, and we have commuters using, you know, transit effectively, because we're a very transit community. You know, across the Rio Grande Valley, people live and work in cities all over, and it's amazing when you commute because you literally see almost the same people. You know, and I always joke over the last 3 years that I've been back in the valley, and it's interesting dynamic that all three of us have roots here, but had external perspective. So when we came back, we didn't know who didn't like each other or didn't care. So we had some very fresh perspectives. So I hadn't noticed that till you said something, Noel. But you know, things are growing all the time. And bus transit service, it's really exciting. And we've done a great strides in that seamless connectivity. We have to maximize resources. And the thing about collaboration, I think we've learned through this process and through transit, you have to operationalize collaboration. You can't say that we're going to collaborate, you know, and never feel good, tap each other in the back, and just truly mean that. To actually put that into operational procedural practice. How does that actually look to the user? So we're doing that. We're doing that with transit, and I think that's exciting. And yes, you know, if we continue to do this right, this RTA gives us the framework for what could be a light rail. So, which is really exciting, and we think, as operators, again, we know we have a long way to go, but this region deserves just as much infrastructure and resources as any other region. We're that robust. So I think it could happen, and it probably will happen. And I'm excited about the steps we're going to take before we actually get there.
You know, he's pulling out the checkbook.
Yeah. So.
A quick comment. I would say that the vision and the thinking should be commended. It starts with the vision first. Practically speaking, and that's what Ron was talking about, right-of-way acquisition, financial feasibility, maximizing the current transit. I mean, those are all necessary steps, and you kind of have to go, it's like being in graduate school, you have to earn your way there. So would I endorse light rail? Yes, it is kind of the ultimate type of system and service that you want to provide. Do we have work to do to get there? We do, but it's great that we have the legislation in place and we have that ability. Here in the short term, the MPO is working on a tip for transit, a transportation improvement plan for transit only, and we recently worked with Ron and his team to make sure that Brownsville Metro was in there. Initially it wasn't, it was just Valley Metro, and then we said, well, we have to include Brownsville Metro if we're gonna have that regional perspective on origin and destination surveying, looking at technology and all those different options. Because even when you have rail, there could still be gaps. When I left the Dallas area, us in Capel, we had a last mile gap. We had 500,000 square foot of Amazon, which was, over 10,000 employees, I think it was. So many of them worked in Amazon, couldn't afford to live in Amazon, live in Capel. So yeah, they couldn't live in the surrounding cities. They were too affluent. So they had to come in from South Dallas and other places, North Dallas, smaller cities that were growing. So even with light rail, transit, bike ped, and all these other modes, you still had a gap. We actually had to work with rideshare providers and had this innovative program that we worked on with Uber and Lyft to get them to their destination at the end point. So, and we had DART. We had a convoy line going from Plano to Fort Worth, to the Dallas Fort Airport, going through, and all that being in place, there was still some gaps. So I think it's just, you have to kind of work your way there, earn your way there, and then when you're there, making sure that you're addressing the short-term needs, but having a longer-term perspective. And I think now having the RTC there, we can at least plan with that in mind and take some steps now to get there.
Cool. Any comments, Pete? No?
Yes, so to me, this is the ultimate conversation starter, and I pull this map all the time. It's a long-range map.
I thought it was a checkbook.
Of the RGV a long-range plan for the valley. The reason I refer to this map is because it's very evident that Interstate 2, we have traffic volumes from 50,000 vehicles a day to 150,000, depending on where you're at, from Sullivan City to Brownsville. And if we don't do something other than expand and find opportunities to transit, whether it be rail, bus system, and what have you, that interstate could potentially be totally congested and shut down during certain times of the day. And so one of the challenges that we have is to look at any and other opportunities. And so as we move forward, we're looking at parallel corridors, if you will, to run east and west that connect our Great Valley. And so things happen in Cameron County that affect Hidalgo, and things happen in Hidalgo that affect Cameron County. If I happen not to be in Austin or Houston and what have you, the weeks that I'm here all week in the valley, I'm in Cameron County at least twice a week. And so I get to travel that interstate corridor all the time. And it is just amazing how over the last 15 years or so, we've had very little interstate traffic to what we have today. And I left the mission this morning at 6:30 in the morning, and it was red lights all the way through and white lights the other way. And that happens every day, folks. And so we have to find other opportunities to make that happen.
Awesome, thank you, Pete. Well, we have a Brownsville crowd, so I'm just gonna skip over a couple of questions I had here, but Brownsville projects, RGV MPO, we talk a lot about having that fifth seat, having that, all this money, these billions of dollars. What are the Brownsville, from Brownsville, the island projects, and I know there's a lot of conversation around the second access, and is that included? So I guess, I know there's two projects on my mind are the East Loop. What's the progress on the East Loop? Is the second access part of any plan, with the RGV MPO? And I guess I'll wait for that. So those two questions.
Okay, so let me address the East Loop. We at Tex are working very closely with Cameron County RMA and Cameron County as a whole to look at this project. CCRMA has taken the lead. They are working with the county, with the city of Brownsville to develop the environmentals, the schematics, to start looking at right away what would be needed. And so they're continuing to work through that. Because of the merger, there is a transition period that we're working through. East Loop project is a project that will connect the Port of Brownsville to the international bridges and effectively move the overweight, oversized vehicles that currently use State Highway 48, State Highway 4, if you will, to get down there, remove that. Where we have a lot of business, schools and what have you. So that project is a very, very important project. We'll continue to work with CCRMA and their partners to develop that project. It's about an $80 million project that could grow to about $120 million, depending how many overpasses we choose to work through. So it's moving along. These type of things do take some time, and we're excited to continue to work that in partnership with the region. As far as the second access, that project has a toll component. Right now, there's a moratorium by TxDOT Commission that we are not allowed as a state agency to spend state dollars on a toll project. And until that moratorium is lifted, we don't have that authority. However, CCRMA continues to develop that project, going through the environmental clearance process. So perhaps if things change one day, we'll be in a better position. I do want to talk real quickly about State Highway 48 though. There's a lot of things happening in the Port of Brownsville. And so I want to make sure that we work with the city and with the port to identify needs. We had a discussion at one of the last meetings for the Brownsville MPO about which overpass do we put in. Well, I think we're going to need multiple overpasses. The one that makes most sense at this time is the one at Anfields. But in time, as the port continues to bring in LNG type companies and other developments, if you will, there's going to be more and more traffic on State Highway 48. So we need to start looking at a corridor type project and identify what opportunities we have to build there to the Port of Brownsville. There's other projects that are attached to the Port of Brownsville, Southport Connector as an example. We have SpaceX out there, so we're looking at State Highway 4. So there are many projects that we're looking at, if you will, for the Brownsville area.
Yeah, the perspective I definitely want to bring is, so the Transportation Policy Board, which we've been talking a lot about, it's only 13 members that again are the ultimate governance. But obviously there's a lot of activity and information that comes up to drive the decisions that they make. Some of that and a lot of that is the staff members of the MPO as an organization. But really, it boils down to cities and the capacity that they have to advocate for themselves. But it's not just advocacy. You have to do advocacy with information, with data, with projects, with capacity. And so it really takes a lot from a city structure to feed into the decisions that the MPO are gonna make. You know, and that's a struggle. And I will say, and I'll commend the city of Brownsville, and specifically Noel here, for having the vision of a redesign of a city department that is almost gonna be designed in a way not only to meet the city of Brownsville's needs, but to ensure that the MPO is gonna get the information that they need to ensure that the city of Brownsville is not left out of any equation. So it really does come to structure from the city to provide the information. And you know, what Noel has done with that city department has just been excellent. And I think that's where it starts, because quite honestly, any regional organization, you know, at its grand scale will never have the capacity to you know, have every factor correlate.
Oh, no,
It really takes the cities to keep driving the information.
Well, you all answered my other question.
I'm sorry about that.
No,
Before I turn it over,
because my one question was, what does it mean for the port? And Pete just went through that list of projects. My next question was, what does it mean for Brownsville? And so what is Brownsville doing about it? And so I think Ron's starting to get to that, but
Sure.
you could provide a little more insight on
Yeah, what we've done is we've created a multimodal transportation department. So we have taken former MPO staff, we have Brownsville Metro. So Brownsville Metro, for the sake of not having to rebrand, it didn't make sense to rebrand. So it's still Brownsville Metro, but they sit under the multimodal transportation umbrella. And then we did have a biped part-time planner under Parks. So we converted that position to a full-time position, and we're gonna go out now with the new fiscal year being in place and hire a professional credentialed biped coordinator. So we're taking transit, B-Metro, and MPO staff and the biped planner, and they're all gonna live within this one department that basically mirrors the work of the MPO. And what we found is, for example, we're collaborating better, but we're making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. Because when a biped issue comes up, well, my expectation is the biped coordinator is gonna bring it to light. When the tip for the RFP that's gonna go out for the transit tip was out there, Norma and her staff caught, hey, B-Metro's not in there, and Helen, our deputy, is overseeing that department. So basically, we're making sure that we leave no room for error, so to speak, within our organization when it comes to transit, highway planning, biped. All of it will be done under one shop, and all that work, they all attend MPO meetings. Mark Lund is our TAC member, Norma's the backup, Helen's there. So basically for us, it was the structure that we felt was going to allow us to then work seamlessly internally and then plug and play within the RGV MPO structure.
Cool. So I'll have one last question for Pete, and I think it's just because it's on the minds of people in Brownsville. Just that I know it went out for bid, and I think it's going to get started pretty soon. Boca Chica medians, I know, and then we'll open it up to questions to the crowd.
Okay.
But just Boca Chica, just an update, real quick update.
Yeah, so the project has been led. It's about a $3.4 million project. The scope of the work is to add race medians to improve safety and mobility in that entire corridor. They had a pre-construction meeting just last month, and so we're going to work with the contractor to mobilize and start the construction. It'll be about 18 months or so, and so we're excited for that project. State Highway Boca Chica is one of the top 100 congested roadways in the state, and so that's one of the reasons why we want to ensure that we were doing something to address, if you will, all that congestion and improve the safety.
So when does the shovel hit the ground? New Year or?
We would anticipate starting in November, the very preliminary stuff. We understand we're going to go into the holiday season. but
Traffic control, all
We
that.
got to get started.
Yeah.
And so I would anticipate it'll probably be in the November time.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pete. Are there any questions? I think Adam's over there with the mic, the wireless mic.
I don't have a question.
There you go.
Comment. We actually have the bid opening for the Southport Connected. So,
Can you give us an update? What's the so the bid's opening, and what's the construction timeline?
I think, well, obviously, because it involves MPO funding, tech stop funding, local funding. Actually, we even have some of the Rider 45 funding involved in that. I think the last I saw was, once the reviews are done at every level, possibly would begin in February. I think that's what it's now. So, that, the opening will be today, obviously, the court will be issuing the contract, but obviously it will be in collaboration with all the entities, but, I think the construction, schedule was to begin in February, and I think it got expanded to 300 days from 240 for completion, so it's gonna take a year, 14 months or so, but,
Hey, that's less than the median.
beg your pardon?
That's less than the medians.
Well,
No.
well, the Southport connector, you could technically say might be the first leg of the
The East
East Loop, but instead of beginning in Brownsville and working down Highway 4 to connect to the port, it's actually gonna start there. And a lot of the impetus for that, quite candidly, is SpaceX, but what it is the south entrance to the port connecting to Highway 4. And Highway 4 is critical to connect for the purposes of East Loop.
Yeah.
So that project is to be let, I think, a bid opening is today.
Thanks, Ed. Any other questions?
Well, I do want to say, because I don't know if we hashed this out enough, but in terms of having a seat at the table with a large five.
Oh, sure.
So there was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, but, so there was four, before we merged, and answering the question of why do we merge? So there was 4 large MPOs. We're now the 5th large MPO. Prior to us being one of the big 5, those 4 would get 80% of all available funding for projects.
Discretionary fund.
Discretionary funding. Well, no, all combined funding.
Combined.
All
Combined,
combined funding
okay.
there are would go to those 4. So now that puts us in the mix with available, and then all the other MPOs would get 20%. So we were fighting for millions.
Yeah, so
Now we're gonna be fighting for billions.
the 4 largest MPOs got 80% of the funding, and 21 other MPOs got 20% of the funding. And now we've jumped over to the big bowl, if you will.
So you're swimming in a bigger pool.
Well, and the
Or a
purpose
bigger
of the
pond.
bidding, because we were allocated 1.1 billion for the next UTP, so for the next 10 years, we'll have $1.1 billion that we were not gonna have. So it didn't really take long for the evidence to come out in terms of did it make sense or not.
Sure.
So that's $1.1 billion that we're not gonna come to the Rio Grande Valley and now, are driving the next major iteration of regional projects.
So I started the conversation by saying we doubled in construction, we doubled our portfolio, we doubled our funding. We went from 1.1 to, in essence, 2.2 billion in this last UTP update. So we're doubling our funding for some of the major projects.
And just one other comment, then this department we have, and we actually went back last week, we spent time at the Dallas Fort Worth MPO. And we did that more so because we have a new mayor, our Commissioner Golonsky is the backup. And we took our staff up to kind of get some lessons learned. And part of the mindset, and I get questions about projects, and projects matter. We're gonna get started here with costs for projects being the method, but eventually MPOs merge and evolve into a more data-driven approach. And I think the mindset of projects by sub-region is gonna prevail for the most part. But at some point, we have to have the mindset of what does the data say? It cannot be as simple as a project for this sub-region, for the central, lower valley, and upper valley. Sometimes it has to be what makes sense to drive the regional highway network or regional transit better. And from our perspective, is we're doing everything we can for Brownsville to make sure that no projects were lost in the transition, the UTPs carried over. We basically have an amalgamation or a combination of our MTPs, so everything is cohesive, everything's being done. Now it's, how are we gonna drive the projects? Well, we're not gonna drop the ball there either, but I think what I would encourage many to understand is that the mindset shift needs to be one that not everything needs to be project by project. And by sub-region, it has to have a technical foundation, and it has to have a data analytics approach to how you decide where to allocate your monies and where you get your highest payoff.
And if I could elaborate as well, that's a great segue, because Ron talked about consensus building and collaboration. Well, how do we pick the highest priority projects for the entire region? If you start looking at just sub-regions, that could itself cause some controversy. So at Textile, we use a tool called Decision Lens that helps the data-driven approach to determine which projects. Is there a political component at times? Yes, there could be. But at the end of the day, our policy board will have that information to help drive and make the decisions for the benefit of the entire region and not just one particular sub-region.
No other questions?
I have one question for you.
Yeah.
If we can have you speak on that.
So my name is Monica Guerrero. I'm an alderman for the town of Rancho Viejo. I also represent one of the major industries coming into the valley. And so my question to the MPO, as you now are looking at regional issues, how are you incorporating the perspectives of industry and the impact that it has of serving as a catalyst for population growth, economic prosperity? How are those interests being represented in the decisions that you make for infrastructure improvement? I think when you have a structure that incorporates industry interest, that you also have available resources through the industry to support your endeavors. So what is that structure like? Have you thought about how that is going to be reflected in the numbers as you look at regional issues for transportation needs, infrastructure needs? That's an important forecast. I mean, 3 million by the year 2040 is pretty impressive. And I know that industry is a major catalyst for that.
I'll take it up. So from a formal perspective, there's a technical public participation process. So that is open to, every citizen, especially, and even corporations. I'll tell you though that that industry lives within a jurisdiction that has a voice within the MPO structure. In that case, City of Brownsville. Port of Brownsville right now has, I believe, a role in the TAG. As a city, as the RGV MPO evolves, the Port of Brownsville may one day have a seat at the policy board. We don't know. That could be, I don't want to throw wrenches into the process, but all I'm saying is, for example, in the Dallas area, Dallas-Fort Worth MPO, when that MPO began, they didn't have a seat at the table. As their airport grew, they became a player because they had to capture that voice on a more formal level. That could occur. We're just kind of starting out. So the answer is there's the public participation process. There's the City of Brownsville has a responsibility to also communicate on behalf of industry in its jurisdiction. So the mayor, as the policy board member, going back to that example, Amazon communicated to the city, and the city is who had to work through the MPO to create these workforce transit options because it was becoming a threat to the city if employees couldn't get to that location. So it goes both ways. You all can have your way of getting engaged, but then the jurisdiction should also support your needs at the MPO level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I will also add the Cameron County, your county judge has a seat at the table as well. So whether you work through the city or the county, you're well represented.
I would like to add to that to just say also it's also from an asset management standpoint, and I think planners of all levels, from transit to transportation, MPO, economic development, we know where our assets lie in the Rio Grande Valley. And if you just took a high-level look, pretty much all resources already do align for where the assets are, where the industry growth would occur. I think we've done a great job there, and I don't think we would be stumped by one random kind of piece of land in an area that we hadn't identified for growth. So it's definitely probably the largest driving factor when it comes to it.
Yeah.
I think we have
One comment.
both Eddies on either side.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Eddie Hernandez, with the Brownsville Public Utilities Board, and also I was a representative on the MPO for the Brownsville Chamber of Commerce for a number of years. Following up with Noe's point, the local MPO kind of served as a local, it had representation from the different areas, the Chamber of Commerce, the port, the airport, etc., Rancho Viejo, San Benito. But what they were able to do was to bring a voice from those different areas, come together and kind of say, hey, this is a concern, we need to address this, along with the city. And to me, it seems that piece is missing. I'm very happy that the city's putting together a department that will be handling that. That's great. that back so that the people who actually live here and work here have a voice in that also.
Right.
Because to say that, well, we have a representative, that doesn't cut it.
Right.
Because you need
Sure,
you need to have that input.
Yeah, and largely, I would say, Eddie, that's a great point, and that's additional work that we have left to do. I think that sentiment still even lies within us and the broader MPO at the staff level, because the collaboration, I think, the spirit of collaboration is there, are the mechanisms there, not entirely. And I think that's homework that we still have, because, for example, right now, we have the TAC and the policy board, but the TAC, I mean, there's a lot more that can be done beyond the TAC to formally engage with the stakeholders that we know we need to be engaging with. Some of that will lie within when the new director comes on board. They have to also think about what can the RGV MPO do to further engage with the subdivisions, and then what can we do as a city, us, the county, for example, to further connect with our community. And those are some of the processes that have not really been established outside of the formal basic requirements for public participation, the TAC. I mean, you have the basic elements in place right now, but we haven't gone to the degree that we need to make sure that those gaps are filled. So that's a good point.
I will add to that, just to say that there's great sensitivity to that issue. And that's why I made those comments specifically about the city of Brownsville. And they're fortunate to have the capacity to do something like that. But when it comes to smaller cities, I mean, there's 43 incorporated cities across the valley, and there's a large voice that got lost through this process. So I will assure you that from the LRGVDC, from the Council of Governments, we're addressing that advocacy from a different way. We have something called the Small City Coalition, the Large City Coalition. We have, because we also represent 43 cities, all the school districts. So we are doing other conduits through other advisory committees to get that voice up. But I will share, there's sensitivity, so we know we have to keep addressing that gap.
If I may, just real quick. Yeah. Communication. The key here is to ensure that your voice is heard, going to either entity, whether it's the MPO, the city, the county, text us directly, get your voice heard. If you have issues, concerns, please let us know so we can address them.
I think we have to hammer this. So we just recently completed three public participation sessions. One in Brownsville, one in Harlingen, one in Westlaco. We had a combined attendance of about 24 individuals. It boils down to that. We make deliberate attempts to get out the intent to get that voice from diverse perspectives, but people just don't show. We engage social media, we use other means, but we just have to. So every advocate, and thank you all for being here as advocates in this community, need to continue to relay that message to other advocates. So there is opportunities, they just have to capitalize when there is.
And kind of following up on Pete's point about communication. There's a lot of things going on right now, especially in tech stuff. A lot of studies right now, they're focusing on ports of entry. There's the freight mobility and all that. And we kind of stand in an area where to some degree we're very fortunate, but it also, how are we going to approach the multimodality of the region? The fact that we have every aspect of a transportation facility in this area. And it's kind of unique in the sense that it really doesn't happen once you get out of Cameron County. But that has to be important too, and I hope how that flows into the MPO's work, even if it's just a perspective of understanding, how important rail is to the region, the growth rate. And I'm not talking about light rail, that's sexy, it moves people like airlines, but we're talking about freight, we're talking about private industry, we're talking about, energy. Same thing goes with marine transportation. So, we have all those assets, but somehow or other that also has to flow into, this whole planning purpose, because, everybody understands the issue of getting stuck in a traffic jam. And, that's the number one deal, but it's much beyond that in the whole scheme of things. So I hope that there's, that opportunity to also include that far spectrum of the.
We got to think about flying cars.
Right, and I'm not sure what happened. Do you all have?
Freight traffic.
So Eddie, it's a great point. We will be conducting, and we're not there because we will engage the port, but it's about to kick off soon, and Norma's over here nodding her head. We're going to be conducting under the new department here, the first Brownsville multimodal transportation plan. And take that to the RGV MPO and set the tone for the multimodal element that we have, that we know we have, we're gonna do the first study. So we're gonna take the lead on that. I don't believe the MPO has a plan yet to do a tip on multimodal. We do. So Brownsville's gonna take the lead on that and leave no room for error. That's one thing I told the commission is we're going to do what we need to be doing to position ourselves. That is a big concern that our mayor has and our commission has. Let's not get lost in translation here. So we're gonna lead that first plan that will, I don't know, will it just morph into the regional plan? Probably not, but it will be the basis for which I would hope the RGV MPO can then do the same for the region. But we're gonna take the lead for Brownsville.
Yeah, when there's instances like that, it usually unveils data that says, we need to do this as a larger scale. So, you know, it's great when cities do initiatives like that, because it's the catalyst for greater projects.
Well, I wanna thank you all,
I'm sorry, we have one more question. He's been waiting for a
I
while.
have a question. Are there any plans on widening Military Highway from Brownsville to McCown?
I'll take that question. So we have various projects. It used to be just a two-lane roadway. We've added the Super 2 element, Super 2 meaning an additional lane that allows for a passing opportunity. We're not quite done at this point to connect basically from Brownsville to FAR. There is one more project that is yet to be let. We are working to try and fund that project. I believe the limits of that are from 1732 to 14, or maybe it's 509. There's a gap that we're looking to fund. And so the intent there, and I mentioned this map, right now we're going from a two-lane roadway to a Super 2 to allow the passing. But ultimately our goal is to have a 4-lane divided highway to be able to move that freight along Military Highway.
well, I wanna thank you all very much for coming, Ron and Pete, all the way down in this cold weather. I'm sure you didn't wanna wake up this morning. But thank you very much for coming. I hope this isn't the last conversation we have, and I think there will be more later on in the year, so.
Thank you for the
Ladies and
opportunity.
gentlemen, let's go ahead and give him a round of applause for this time.